Welcome. I'm happy to close National Library Week with this event, sharing expert information about the All of Us research program. I'm Cindy Sheffield, a biomedical librarian here at the NIH Library. Brandy Mapes will be telling us about the All of Us Researcher Workbench. I'm delighted to introduce Brandy because Brandy is also a fellow librarian. And she's going to tell us how to register, how to manage costs, and get support. But first, I want to cover a few quick housekeeping items to remind you about a few things at the NIH Library. So this session is being recorded. The slides and recording will be sent to everyone who registered. Please use the Q&A option for questions, and questions will be answered when the presenters are complete. And we'll get to as many questions as possible. And of course, please fill out the survey after today's presentation. We always value your feedback. To use the Q&A feature, just click in the Q&A at the bottom of the toolbar on the meeting window. And from there, you can submit questions or respond or add comments. You can submit a new question. You can comment on submitted questions. And feel free to use the thumbs up icon to upvote questions. Upvoting makes it easier for us to know what questions most participants are interested in knowing about. Just a few quick notes about the NIH Library Research Analytics Services. Our bibliometric service provides publication analysis to staff. We also provide access to bioinformatics analysis tools and databases and related training. In data services, we provide information on data management, data visualization, data analysis, and coding language such as R and Python. Or maybe you might want to sign up to use our virtual public workstations using applications such as the Partex suite of tools, MATLAB, SPSS or SAS or NVivo, as well as many other software applications. You'll find these on our website, or you can contact me with questions. My email is bottom of this slide, which you'll receive early next week, along with the recording of this session. And then finally, here is a list of upcoming dates for April and May classes. Topics include statistical analysis, Excel, R, and RStudio, as well as many AI technology and data management classes. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Brandy Mapes. Brandy is an assistant director at the Vanderbilt Institute for Clinical and Translational Research, specializing in strategic planning and implementation of the national research programs, including past work on the National Health Genomic Research Institute's eMERGE network and NCAT's Clinical and Translational Science Awards program. Her current portfolio includes the All of Us Research Program's Data and Research Center, where she has led efforts to develop and implement researcher education, training, and outreach programs, as well as methods for participant survey and accompanying research support and material development. In addition to All of Us, she also supports Vanderbilt's local biorepository program, BioVU, and it is my especially honor to introduce her because she is a fellow colleague librarian. And so without further ado, take it away, Brandy.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am really excited to talk to you all about the All of Us research program, specifically the Researcher Workbench and how to get started. So as the second webinar within our series, I'm going to focus on the objectives you see on our screen. I know my colleague, Dr. Shelley, during that first webinar, provided a really nice background on All of Us, our mission as a program, a summary of the data that we're collecting and making available for research, as well as a walkthrough of how that research is stored and housed and made available through our platforms. So I'm going to pick that up and do a brief overview, just a recap of what the Researcher Workbench is in the context of the researcher ecosystem. I'm also going to walk through some slides that cover the logistics and some of the framework we have around accessing. And then we're going to jump into a couple of considerations, considering this is in the cloud, some things that you want to keep in mind about cloud compute, cost, and billing setup. So let's go on to our first section. And I'll just All right, so I think in Dr. Shelley's first webinar, we talked about how the Research Hub, our public site, which is researchallofus.org, is really the storefront for our research data and tools and community. So you can always access the Researcher Workbench directly from that public site, but it exists as a secure enclave that's accessible specifically to researchers who register and gain access to participant level data. So whereas the public site, you're going to be seeing aggregate data, you're going to learn about our tools, our protocol. In the Researcher Workbench, you're actually going to have the platform, the analysis capabilities, and the data at the participant level. So this screen here, you'll just see a walkthrough of what this looks like. On your left-hand side is just a screenshot from our public website. At the very top right-hand side, you'll see that researcher login button. That button will take you directly to the platform. Some things to think about in terms of the Workbench. Like I said, this is the analysis platform. So the way that we enable that is through workspaces. Workspaces are project level homes. So you might have a workspace devoted to a specific project. Within that workspace, you may have multiple analysis notebooks, but the workspace is conceptually tied to a single project. Types of tools that we make available there for use are things to help you build your cohort. So figuring out what inclusion, exclusion criteria you want to use for your cohort of interest, tools to help you select the variables that you want to include in your data set, and then applications that you would use to run your analysis. So for example, Jupyter Notebooks, which you can use R or Python programming languages, or as well as RStudio as an application, and SAS, which was very recently introduced this week. Accompanying the platform, we make available support materials and staff and services, which we'll talk about a bit at the end of this session. The other thing to keep in mind about the platform that makes it unique is, though we are making available that participant level data, we're making it available in two separate curated data repositories, or what we refer to as CDRs. So researchers will be able to access the registered tier. All researchers who gain access to the Researcher Workbench immediately by default have access to this tier of data. This tier of data includes sources like surveys, electronic health records, physical measurements, and wearable devices, specifically data from Fitbit. These data are made available with some privacy protections in place. So for example, certain fields are generalized or suppressed to protect participants, because this is our most widely available version of the data. Also within the Workbench is what we refer to as the controlled tier data set. This is data that researchers who are eligible for the Workbench can also access, as long as their data use and research agreement within their institution allows for it. And within the controlled tier, you're going to see the same data sources that you'd see at the registered tier, but in some cases, those data are at a more granular level. You'll also see additional data. So we make available genomics data, as well as some select items from health and lifestyle surveys that are unavailable in the registered tier. One thing to keep in mind about the Workbench and our access framework is that the program itself does not require an IRB approval. We have introduced what we refer to as a passport model. So we are vetting the researcher themselves versus the individual projects. All researchers, as they enter and create those workspaces we discussed, will create a description of their project, which is made publicly available to the community. So people can see what sorts of great research is being done, but the actual access is at the researcher level. It's not at the project concept level. In some cases, researchers may want to check with their local institutions on what sort of local requirements may be, but as a program, it's not required for access. So now we're going to talk about some of the prerequisites for getting access, as well as a few screenshots that'll walk through what that contextual information looks like as an actual research user. So in terms of overview, our process has a few steps. Everything starts at the institution level. So all researchers need to be affiliated with an institution. that has a signed data and use and registration agreement on file. You'll hear me later refer to that as a JURA. That's sort of the internal acronym we use to describe that documentation, but it's a contract that happens at the institution level. Affiliated researchers at the institutions, we make this available currently to academic, nonprofit, and medical organizations, both domestically as well as internationally. Once those contracts are in place, a researcher is then moving through the process on their own. So this starts with registering your actual account, as in creating your credentials on the Workbench platform, verifying your identity and completing research ethics training. We have research ethics training, responsible code of conduct training that everyone completes, as well as a second course specific to control tier considerations for those researchers who access it. The next thing that'll happen is researchers sign a data user code of conduct. This is an agreement between the researcher and the program, making sure that they understand the policies and the expected responsible code of research principles that we want everyone to follow, and they're agreeing to abide by those when they access this data. At that point, all of those steps happen directly within the Workbench registration platform itself. So the platform will walk you through those steps. And once those are completed, a researcher is considered registered and ready to access the data. The next things that'll happen are workspace creation, project creation, cohort, data set building. So on our public website, if you click the register button, which is on the right-hand side of that screen, it's here in orange, you'll actually see the steps listed. And we're going to walk through a couple of those on here today, because I think these are a couple of steps where we can see the most questions. So we're going to walk specifically through step number 1, and we'll show you what happens once you're done with 1 and get over to 2. So researchers, the very first thing you're going to want to know is, does my institution have a data use and research agreement in place? And if not, how do I get one? From the public site, you can actually confirm whether or not your institution has one. So following this link on the public site will take you to a list of all institutions. This page is on researchallofus.org. You can search by your institution. You can see in this screenshot here on the right, we have a middle column labeled access level that will tell you whether or not your institution, if it is listed, allows researchers to use the registered or the controlled tier data, or both. You'll also see the individual at your institution who's responsible for contracting. So this would be your representative in an office such as contracting and our Office of Research. So if you see your institution in this list, you are good to go and you are ready to register and complete your own steps. If you don't see this, your institution, the next thing you're going to do is actually submit a request. So you'll see on that same page, there's a button for that. It's going to take you to a request form. Well, you'll be asked to fill in some information. Our team will then use that information to work with an institution. So I'm going to just talk briefly about what the model is in place for a DURA. An institutional DURA just covers an institution's users. So these are users that are affiliated with the institution, and the institution is saying, I take responsibility for my users and their actions, and I'm going to help monitor. Researchers who register for the access, there's a couple of different ways. So the default way that an institution tells the program that they're going to take responsibility for their users' actions is by saying, I'm going to allow you to affiliate anyone with my institution's research email domain. So this could be something like @umc.org. That's the default, and that's the one that we see most often used. Institutions also have the option to say, I want to specify individual users that I want to allow access to this data by going through what we call a pre-approval method. And again, our team will work with the institution on implementing that. So there's no burden on the researcher themselves. Once an institutional agreement is in place, that point of contact you saw listed on that first page we looked at, they'll receive a monthly report. So this report will include a list of all of their users who are registered and have access to that data. They can review that and they can let us know as needed if any of those users need to rotate off, have left the institution, should no longer have access, and our team will work with them to make sure that that's taken care of. So if you're a researcher whose institution does not currently have a DURA in place and you go to submit the form, this is just an example of what that form is going to look like. I usually recommend to researchers that they've done a couple of things when they're ready to submit a request. The biggest thing is just making sure you know who your signing official for your institution is, because we do ask for that information in the form. If you're unsure, which I think could be very unsure if you're in a large institution, usually asking your department administrator or even your supervisor who from your institution, whether that's in the Office of Contracting and Legal or another office, would be able to serve in that role. You want to make sure that you have that info to proceed. I think that cuts down on a lot of back and forth time. Once these requests are submitted, our team, we have a team that we refer to as DURA support. They will then reach out to that signing official on the researcher's behalf to let them know that there's been interest from their institution, from their researchers, in creating a contract, and then they'll work with that point of contact as well as our own legal contact to initiate and execute a contract. Contracts can be done fairly quickly, but I'll just note that they're very dependent on the individual institution and their signing officials' timelines. So we always encourage a researcher, if you've requested a DURA and you haven't seen anything, contact your contacting official, let us know. We'll be happy to ping them for an update on your behalf, but timelines are very dependent on the institution and so can range. If you're somebody you're affiliated with an institution who has a DURA in place already, you're ready to go. You can just click this Create Account button on that main page and it'll take you to our landing. This is what that looks like. So you'll just click Create an Account. From there, you will be, I'll just pause for a minute to say, you'll be assigned credentials. Your credentials will be at researchallofus.org. That's the domain that we use. So you'll be given a username and a password. Once you log in with that username and password, you'll be taken to a landing page where you'll walk through those remaining steps. So you'll be prompted to do ID verification. You'll be prompted to do your ethics training. You'll be prompted to sign the data user code of conduct. I just want to remind everybody some of the benefits and, for joining, all researchers who have access, you have access to our entire suite of tools, our data, our support. All researchers who join are given an initial $300 worth of compute credit so that they can get started on their project before a billing account is set up. We also have support materials and staff, as I mentioned, virtual office hours, fully a really robust public knowledge base of materials about our protocol and our data. And there's also opportunities throughout the program to showcase your work. We just had a couple of weeks ago our virtual conference where we invited researchers from across the community to come in and present on some of the work that they have recently completed. I will say all of us is fantastic for so many different use cases. I love going out and talking to researchers in the community at conferences about what they're doing. We hear a lot from grads, undergrads, dissertation, thesis. You'll see a lot of people who are interested in doing this for, of course, manuscripts, but also class projects. We've seen it used in a really unique way in terms of academic curriculum, having a instructor assigned to the class specific projects in mind, or having those class come up with them as a way to learn data science, computer science, as well as research. So now that we've gone through just some things you need to keep in mind about registering, I do want to talk about some of the considerations for the cloud, some of the costs that can be incurred, and some information you'll want to know about billing. So the first thing to keep in mind is that the program does not charge for access to the data. You can come in there, register, and get access. And as I mentioned, there's $300 in credit. The thing that where costs are incurred is actually from the cloud platform, so computational analyses and storage. So one thing to keep in mind is that we like to say cost is equal to your environment spend, the size of your data, and the amount of files you're storing. So an environment is a virtual machine within the cloud that you can use to power your analysis. This is, through a programming language. So an environment is used to start up and power your Jupyter Notebook, RStudio, or SAS application. There is a default setting for that. So it's default set to what you're actually seeing on the screen. It's 20 cents an hour. It's a minimal cost, but researchers have the ability to tweak that. So tweak their setting just depending on the amount of compute power or data that they have. And all of those tweaks, all of those things play into your eventual cost. The other thing is the data, so the size of data that you're actually working and pulling into your environment. We really recommend researchers to use the cohort builder tools, the tools that we make available for creating your cohort based on some inclusion/exclusion criteria. That's super helpful. You are also able to work directly with the data within your application and pull data in that way. But it's just really important to be mindful about the size and what you're using. So for example, if you're running a project on something that you're looking at survey concepts and maybe some variables from the EHR, that's a lot less data. The size of that is probably smaller than, say, you're looking at something like minute level Fitbit data versus summary, or something like very large phylogenomics data. That can be more expensive. The other thing is storage. So you're able to store files within your workspace. So as you generate something, an output in a notebook, you want to keep that as part of your project, you're able to. We always recommend to researchers, and I think this isn't something specific to all of us, this is just something to keep in mind about the cloud in general, is make sure you're just reviewing. Take a look at, do I need these files anymore? Is there a way that I could tweak my code to make it a little more efficient? Do I need all of this data? Have I really hit on the fact that I've nailed this down to the exact variables that I have in mind? All of that plays a role. I will say, though, I'm not saying this to scare any researchers, because I think we're seeing many projects done from start to finish without even maxing out that initial $300 in credit. It's been a while since I looked, but I think, for example, I've seen we have some resources actually in the support material. If one of my colleagues wants to put that in the chat, but you can run a project on as little as $10, just depending on what you have. If it's genomics, it's going to be higher. So here are just some reminders and some tips that I just went over. Minimize the amount of data you're pulling. Be really considerate of whether or not you need to look at data at that scale. You have exactly what you need. It's a really great idea to test some of your analyses on smaller data sets, especially in cases where you do know that you're looking at data that's going to be very large, such as Fitbit or genomics. Do a couple of test cases. Make sure that you've optimized your code and your workflows as much as possible before getting started with the full set. You can also save your queries in a workspace bucket. That's lower cost than data cost. And the biggest one is making sure that you delete or pause your environment when you're done. We like to say that your environment is like your light switch. Turn it off when you're done. So when you're done with your analyses for the day, you have an environment running, make sure that you go and you turn that off. One thing I want to point out that is really helpful for everyone is just to keep in mind that NIH has a program in place, Strides, that offers really great discounts for any work that's computational work that's done in the cloud, and that's part of NIH funded research. They can be used on most platforms, including the Researcher Workbench. So just keep that in mind as you're working to consider your costs and as you get to the point of you want to set up a billing account. Now we're going to go through logistics around billing in the bench. So as I said, all users come in, $300 worth of credits when you sign up. There's no time limit for when those expire. You can continue to work on and off ad hoc for as long as you're needed and not worry about those going away. You're not going to be charged for anything until you set up your own billing account. So let's say you've run all of your analyses and you've maxed those credits out. You're just going to be paused until you decide to proceed with setting up an account of your own. And you can also, once you set up your account, there are a couple of things through Google where you could be eligible for some additional credits directly through Google, but those aren't affiliated with the program itself. So one thing also to keep in mind is that billing computational spend occurs at the workspace level. So as a researcher, your account is credited $300 and you can use that across all of your projects. So you might have 3 projects that require different amounts of spend. Those credits will be used to support all of those. Each workspace, so our spend is not calculated at the user level. It's calculated at the project. So for example, when you create a project, you as the project creator are billed for those costs. Your credits are spent from your account. You can invite as many collaborators, but it's just something to keep in mind that as additional analyses are run, files are stored, those costs are stored at the workspace and charged to the workspace owner. Whenever you're using the Workbench and you're really close to running out of those initial free credits, you'll receive an email to let you know. They'll be locked. Your workspace will be locked until your billing account is set up and added. Your data will not be deleted. Your code will not be deleted. Everything will be retained, ready for you when you're ready to get started again. Once you do run out of credits, you'll need to link a new or an existing billing account. So this is a billing account that needs to be handled through a contract with Google Cloud Project. So we have some details about this in our support hub that you can review, but I think the advice I typically give to researchers is if you're not sure whether or not your project is you have a billing account for use within your department already, there are a couple of ways we're going to show you to check. You can actually work directly through GCP's third-party billing partner, Carahsoft. So Carahsoft's entire role is to be a relationship manager for researchers and their institutions where they need to establish contracts and set up accounts for computational billing purposes. So there's really no need that a researcher themselves will have to figure all those details out. It's great that you can actually just rely on the relationship manager that GCP provides. They'll also be able to help you and your institution determine whether or not any of your work is eligible for STRIDES credits. And if so, they'll wrap that into the whole setup process. So they'll take care of that on your behalf. They're willing to help you in any way via email, Zoom calls with your lab, your contracting officials, your department to help you figure out the best way to approach a billing account setup and making sure it's just done efficiently and effectively for your team. So in summary, Workbench costs are incurred whenever you use an environment for your analysis, when you pull data into your analyses, or when you store data. Everyone has $300 in credit to get started. And we strongly advise reaching out to our third-party vendor, Carahsoft, in the case where you do need to proceed with a billing account. You can do that directly via your workspace. And unfortunately, I did not put a slide here, so I'll just let everyone know that. But whenever you're actually in your workspace, we have some support articles that cover this. You can just click a button that says, I'd like to get started on a billing account and I'd like Carahsoft's help. That will trigger an email to them. It's very similar to the Dura process. You'll be asked to provide a little bit of information and then they'll get that started on your behalf. And here is actually the information that I'm referring to. So resources to help researchers get started. Anyone who has questions about getting started, they run into trouble registering their account, Our help desk team support at researchallofus.org is always here to help researchers with that and troubleshoot. There's also some information on our support hub about establishing contracts DURAs, going through some troubleshooting issues that may occur with identity verification or our ethics training. So that's a great resource to check out. If researchers are at the point of needing to set up their own billing accounts, we have some really great articles and also videos and training tutorials around that in the support hub. The one that I always recommend is this very first one listed, how to set up and link a billing account in the Workbench. It'll actually walk you through a lot of the information I just talked about on the call. And there's some helpful screenshots to show you what the process actually looks like contextualized. Register researchers also have the benefit of our entire suite of support tools and materials. So we just talked about help desk. We're here every day. You have a question, you've looked through our public materials, you've attended in office hours, you're still just not quite sure, email us, we'll be happy to help. We also offer virtual office hour events every week. So we do these on Tuesday. Tuesday office hours occur at 1 p.m. Central. They're very much organic and sort of like an open Q&A approach. So as a researcher, you have a question, you're stuck, you're not sure, join us, ask your question. There's people on the call to help. We also do office hours on Fridays. Those are usually a little more formal. Those are where we'll walk through a tutorial or an example of a use case, maybe something, introduce a new tool, have a researcher present on some of the work they've recently done. And then monthly, we offer what we refer to as new user orientation sessions. So if you're just getting started and you need an overview and you're not even sure where to start, that's a great call to join. We'll talk about the platform, the tools, the data, policy considerations, and some really great tips for just getting started in general. And then, of course, our support hub, which I talked about, which is available through researchallofus.org. It's a complete wealth of knowledge on information about our tools, our platform. There's videos, there's articles, there's links to data dictionaries and code books. There's also an events calendar, so you can see all of those office hours that are scheduled and take a look and join. Here is what that link looks like. Here is what the public front page of our support hub looks like. So definitely take a look at that. You have some time. I also just want to point out, we would love for you all to join. We'd love for you to register. We're really excited to work with librarians who have an interest and a need for this resource. If you do join today, we'd really appreciate your feedback just so that we know how helpful these webinars are, where we can tweak. So if you do join today, please be sure you'll be prompted to tell us how you learned about the bench. And please just select other and let us know that it was through this event so we can track and see how well we're doing. And for those of you who are ready to join, I've put the QR code here in this slide. It'll take you right to that register page where you can check out whether or not your institution has an agreement and get started. Yep, and of course, I just want to say this would not be possible without the generosity and partnership with our participants, as well as just the dedication and feedback we get from researchers. This is very much a feedback-driven model in terms of support. We love to hear from researchers and how they're doing it, what they need. That really informs our future work, how we can better support researchers, how we can better support the program. And those are all the slides I have. Hopefully that information was helpful, but if there are places where you have questions or feedback or anything you'd like to ask, now's a great time. I'm here.
Thank you, Brandy. Great presentation. I think we have responded to every question in the Q&A. So folks on the call, if you have any questions, I believe you can raise your hand. You can add them into the Q&A box or you can put them in the chat. So we'll sit for a few minutes and see if any questions arise. Brandy, I think you covered it. It appears there are no questions, so I think we can hop to the next slide.
That sounds great.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone, and let me turn on my video for you all. I am a real person. My name is Sydney McMaster. I serve as an engagement specialist and a program officer for the All of Us Research Program, and I have just a few brief announcements to share with you all. So first, as Brandy briefly shared, SAS Viya, also known as SAS Studio, is now available within the Researcher Workbench to all registered researchers. Researchers can choose to use data analysis tools using Jupyter Notebooks through R or Python, RStudio, and as of yesterday, SAS Studio. And this announcement aligns nicely with the next 2 webinars in this series, which you should see on the next slide. Thanks, Brandy. So today's webinar is the second in a series of 5 different webinars. The third will take place next Friday on April 19th from 11 to 12 p.m., so the same time. And this one will cover a deep dive on all of the data types available within the Researcher Workbench. And then the following week, this webinar will provide an overview into coding on the Workbench, specifically using R. So we encourage you to join and register for all of the webinars if you're available. And finally, I want to thank the NIH library staff and wish them a happy library week. Brandy and the DRC staff on the call for joining us, and of course, all of you for joining us today. We will follow up with a link to the recording and the slides shortly next week. And we can stay on for a few more minutes if any questions arise, but if not, we can give you back a few extra minutes to your Friday. Thanks for joining us.